thought we had naan before. It's really good. So I need to actually preheat the stove. You can cook this in any kind of pan, but I'm going to use a cast iron just because it gives you that like really crispy crust. So to start out, I'm going to do 2 cups of flour. And then let's see. Normally you can like scrape it off the top with a knife, but it doesn't have to be that exact. And then next I'm going to do a ½ teaspoon of baking powder. And next I'm going to do a ¼ teaspoon of baking soda. This recipe is really easy because a lot of breads usually require yeast, and this recipe does not, which is really helpful. And it also doesn't have to sit and rise for hours at a time. I usually just let it sit for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And next, I'm just gonna do like a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then last, for the dry ingredients, I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of sugar. That's it for the dry ingredients. I'm actually just going to grab a whisk and just kind of whisk it up a little bit. And then for the wet ingredients, I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of oil. You can kind of use whatever. You can use butter if you like. I usually just use extra virgin olive oil for the flavor. Next, I'm going to do, it calls for like a 1/4 cup of milk. I use whole milk. That's really important when cooking. You want to make sure you use things that have full fat. I'm going to do about ½ cup, and you need warm milk, not hot, not cold. Say just about good lukewarm milk. You can do it in the microwave for about 10-15 seconds. I did ½ cup, but I may not use this all. It just kind of depends. Just about half, because remember the rule is you can always add more, but you can't take any away. And then lastly, you need a cup of, or not a cup, ½ cup of plain Greek yogurt. Don't use vanilla. Vanilla and plain are not interchangeable. I learned that the hard way a long time ago. I was 14, so I was just a kid, but yeah, those are not interchangeable in recipes. This is about ½ cup. I think I'm just gonna do the whole thing and just Hope for the best, that's my motto. And then you can whisk it up just a little. But then at this point, really just want to go in your hands. This part takes a little bit of time. You basically need to knead the dough until it is no longer sticky. It needs to be nice and like pliable. So this can usually take like 5 to 10 minutes. You don't want to over knead though, because it'll be tough, but it's kind of hard to over knead. This is only the second time I've made this recipe, and the first time was a success. And this is actually the first bread that I have ever made, and that's usually not how making bread goes. Usually you fail your first time, so it's a really easy recipe and really great. Okay, so that means a little more milk. It is going to stick to your hands. It'll stick for a little while, and then once you kind of get it molded a little, I'll usually put some flour on my hands and kind of roll it out a little more on the board. Okay, so I let the dough sit for a few minutes, and now I'm going to separate it. You can probably do this into like 4 to 6 pieces. I usually do about 6. Just rolling it out a little bit more. And then you just make, honestly, anything. I think I'm just going to do a pizza cutter. And then we'll do it, let's see. Do it in half first. Section. Well, that's 4, so I guess I'm doing it in 4 instead of 6. But you can honestly do, I kind of like to do it sometimes in 4 instead of 6, because then you can make the pieces a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is, you can roll this out with a rolling pin or a glass, whatever you have, but sometimes if you do that, it can make the dough a little bit tough. So what you want to do is take it with your hands and just kind of go around. Now, naan is supposed to be, it's pretty thin, so it's okay if it even has a few holes in it. And I just kind of, almost like a pizza, and you just kind of spread it out as much as you can, and it's a little heavy, so you can kind of get it to, you can kind of mold it whatever way you like. And just kind of feel if there are any like really thick spots, make sure to spread those out. And it'll tear a little bit, it'll get a few holes. You can close them up if you like, but you don't have to. And I'm just going to lay that out. And then I'm going to make the garlic butter real quick. So what you can do is take just a little bit of butter and just drop it in a bowl. And then I'm going to take some garlic. You can chop this up if you like, but I like to grate it because it's much quicker. I actually don't really have a grater. Not like the one that you should to grate garlic, but you can use one that you would use to like do cheese. And then you can do a couple pieces of garlic. This one is huge, so I'm just going to use this one. And just grate it in there. Be sure not to grate your fingers off. A good tip too is to clean as you go along. Obviously, as you can see, I follow that rule extremely well. My space is very clean and tidy. Take note. Okay, so next I'm just going to heat up a little bit of oil in the pan. You can use whatever kind of oil you want. You can use vegetable oil, canola oil. I am just using vegetable oil. And you don't want enough, so you're not necessarily frying it, but you want enough that it'll get it nice and crisp. Then I'm going to come over here. Since this is a cast iron, the whole thing is hot, so I have to be really careful with this. It's very, very hot. Then take the garlic butter out of here. Just adding in a little bit of parsley. You can do fresh or dried. I just use dried because that's what I have on hand. And after that oil is heated up for just a little bit, just throw this. Hold on. Something good. Okay. Really just lay it in there. It gets really hot. There you go. And it usually takes like a minute or two each side. It cooks really quickly. You can just use tongs and yeah, just kind of sit there and let it cook. Don't move it or flip it or mess with it really. And then you can just kind of check it to see if it's done. Looks pretty good. You also don't want too much oil in the pan because if you have a ton, then it won't brown properly. So I just do just enough to where it'll just crisp it up. But you definitely don't want to do it like you're frying it. You just take the tongs, flip it over, let it cook for about another 2 minutes. I'm just gonna check. Should be done. Yeah, and it's okay if some of it is still looks a little doughy. As long as there are other parts that are nice and crispy like that, that means that it's done. Just put it on a plate, and then take your garlic butter. You can eat it without this, but I really wouldn't because this makes it so much better. Just kind of put it on there. You could also roast your garlic. You can also make cheesy naan, so you just roll the cheese into the bread and then cook it. And it's so delicious. And that's it.